RFK Racing could downsize in 2027 with the Rickware Racing sale to TJ Bashire, and Kyle Larson confirms he will not be attempting to run the double again anytime soon. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just some shows really quickly. We've only got one paint scheme to take a look at, and it's Christian Exodus 2025 Benesh scheme that we'll see this weekend at the Chicago Street Course. Looks very similar to one that AJ Allmendinger had in 2024, and when I believe he ran at Chicago. Car looks really good. Love the colors on it. It does look good. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at the Chicago Street Course. The colors look nice, and they do look really solid and look really good, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sheldon Creed. Now, Sheldon Creed won the pole for the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Atlanta Motor Speedway. With him winning the pole for the Xfinity Series race at Atlanta, that is the first time we have seen in the Xfinity Series where in a long time where they have won a pole, as it's the first Xfinity Super Speedway race where they won a pole for Ford since 2014 in July when Dakota Armstrong in the 43 car won the pole. And remember at that time, that was on a single car speed. That was when they were doing the group qualifying stuff at Super Speedways in 2014. What Sheldon Creed there was really impressive considering how dominant Austin Hill and Jesse Love have been at the Super Speedways, especially in qualifying. They've been extremely dominant on the qualifying side of things. So what they did here was really impressive and really good. So congratulations to Creed and the Haas factory team on getting it done in qualifying. They showed some really great pace and really strong speed. Good to see them get it done in qualifying. They did a pretty good job in qualifying. Really good stuff. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Lime Rock Park. As it was reported by Adam Stern earlier today that he reports that around 20,000 fans attended the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Lime Rock Park, which is about the most we have seen ever attend an event in the state of Connecticut, at least for a NASCAR Truck Series event. This, of course, was the first ever Truck Series race to take place in the state of Connecticut. Despite the fact that the racing itself was not that good in the Truck Series race, the ARCA race is definitely a lot better, I think it was very impressive to see so many fans turn out, and Lime Rock does have a very loyal fan base that comes out to their events, whether it's Trans Am races, whether it's ARCA races, whether it's IMSA races, it doesn't matter. The track has a very loyal fan base, and they didn't do as much promotion if I remember correctly, but what happened here was really impressive for Lime Rock. To have 20,000 fans show up to the first ever truck race at this track was incredible. Now maybe we see the Xfinity Series come here down the road, and if you get the Xfinity Series at this track, I think we're going to get a bigger crowd and bigger attendance. I think it was very impressive to see at least 20,000 fans show up to the event. Pretty good stuff, and glad to see a lot of people were able to come out and show up to the NASCAR Truck Series race at Lime Rock Park. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Austrian Grand Prix. As it was announced earlier today, the Austrian Grand Prix has officially been extended through 2041. I believe they were in either a contract year or the contract had gone for like 2026 or 2027, and now it's been extended into the 2040s. This is now one of the longest contracts we have in Formula One currently at the moment. The Las Vegas Grand Prix recently signed a 2-year extension. I believe that the Miami Grand Prix goes like 2035 or 2036, and now you've got the Austrian Grand Prix that's going to be around through 2041. Makes a lot of sense, though. When it comes to Formula One tracks, the Austrian Grand Prix and the track at Spielberg puts on maybe the best product that Formula One has currently at the moment, or one of the better products. I think the F1 race today was really good, which we're going to talk about here in just a short little bit. But I think it was a great decision to go ahead and extend it. It was about the best decision you can make. Good to see that they're going to continue racing there for the foreseeable future. They'll stay there through 2041. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Austrian Grand Prix. After the NASCAR Cup Series race had taken place at Atlanta, the next morning you had the Austrian Grand Prix that took place. And honestly, we saw one of the most compelling Formula One races we have seen in quite some time. There's a lot of chaos that happened early. They had to have an aborted start because Carlos Sainz couldn't get the car off the track. Then on lap number 1, Kimi Antonelli completely pummeled into the corner, made a massive mistake, and ran into Max Verstappen, taking both those guys out of the event. And then for a lot of the early portion, we saw an unbelievable and great battle between Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, the two fastest guys so far in Formula One this year. But due to some unfortunate strategies that took place and unfortunately having some bad pit stops and staying out a little later, Oscar never really got the chance to get back up there, but he closed the gap in the final couple laps and was within 2 seconds of getting by Lando Norris for the win. But unfortunately, ran out of time to make the move on Lando Norris, got stuck in the dirty air in the traffic, and Lando Norris would come off the corner, I believe, would pick up his 3rd or 4th win of 2025, and what is this, like a 7th or 8th career Formula One victory? Lando dominated this event, put together an unbelievable clinic, had a really, really strong car, a fantastic day for Lando Norris to pick up another win. He's always been good at this racetrack, so it's not shocking and not surprising to see him win this one. Congratulations to Lando Norris on picking up a well-deserved win and well-earned victory. I've been a little uncredited toward him at times, but he did a really awesome and really good job. Glad to see him get the win. He absolutely earned this win in Formula One. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joey Logano. As it was reported by jski.com on Friday afternoon that Joey Logano has been officially nominated for the ESPYs for Best Driver Award for 2024. He has been nominated along the likes of Max Verstappen, Oscar Piastri, and Alex Palou. Now, a lot of you are going to be saying, why is Joey Logano nominated for the Best Driver of the Year? A lot of people were clearly better. Kyle Larson was better in 2024. Christopher Bell was clearly better. Chase Elliott was better. William Byron was better. Tyler Reddick was better. The reason why is because he won the championship last year. Usually when they do the ESPYs for the NASCAR side of the nominations, they go with the driver who won the most previous championship. Personally, I think it should have been the best driver all year long, and if we were going to put someone in there other than Joey Logano, I would have absolutely put Ryan Blaney in over him, because Blaney was a lot better. I would have absolutely put in Christopher Bell, or Kyle Larson, or Chase Elliott, or William Byron. I think those guys were a lot more deserving to make it on this, but that's how they've done it for a long time. You go back to even like 2005 and 2006. They gave Kurt Busch an opportunity to win the ESPYs. They've always done this. Like last year, they gave Ryan Blaney the nomination for it. I think Oscar Piastri or Alex Palou is going to win it this year. I think Palou is the favorite. Palou should get it. He was so dominant last year in IndyCar, and I think he's going to get it next year as well, with how dominant he's been in IndyCar so far this year. But for those wondering, that's how they've done it for a long time. That's why Joey Logano is nominated, and that's why people like Christopher Bell and Kyle Larson, a couple other guys that were stronger than Logano, made it in over them. I don't agree with it personally, but they've had the rules in regards to that for a very, very long time. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Connor Zilich. Now, we all know that Chase Elliott won the NASCAR Cup Series race at Atlanta Motor Speedway. But one story that I feel got a tiny bit overshadowed was a really incredible performance for Connor Zilich in the NASCAR Cup Series race at Atlanta Motor Speedway, as Connor Zilich was able to come off the final corner, survive a lot of the carnage and a lot of incidents in his first ever Super Speedway start, picks up an 11th place finish, and scores nearly his first ever top 10 in NASCAR Cup Series competition. Yes, Connor Zilich had to survive the big one, and a lot of top drivers like Joey Logano and William Byron and Josh Berry and Ryan Blaney and Austin Cindric and you name it. Most of the majority of the guys that were strong in that field were taken out of contention. But he did a really, really good job in this race and raced like a veteran throughout the whole entire night. I was super impressed with the speed that Connor Zilich showed. He was in the top 10 at points of this race. And, there's a lot of talk right now about whether Connor Zilich is going to be in the NASCAR Cup Series or not in 2026. And there's a lot of talking about replacing Daniel Suarez. Runs like he had tonight or last night are going to have him give a chance and opportunity to move up to the NASCAR Cup Series in the future. He did a very good job, showed some really impressive speed, had a really, really good run, did a great job in that Red Bull car. His next Cup Series race is not till Watkins Glen. Personally, if I was Trackhouse Racing, I'd be fielding the car for Connor Zilich this weekend. I get that you don't want to rush him and make him do all these starts so he can focus on trying to win the Xfinity Series title, but if you're trying to maybe move him up to the NASCAR Cup Series next year, why not give him more chance and opportunities to see what he could do? He did a really, really good job, was really impressed with the speed that he showed. He showed some really good stuff, did a great job last night. Good to see him have a phenomenal and really good run, finishing inside the top 15. Very, very impressive. Congratulations to him on getting a good run at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Thomas Anuzi. Now, we obviously had the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Lime Rock Park. But after the Truck Series race had happened, you actually had the ARCA race take place at Lime Rock Park. And this race, unlike the Craftsman Truck Series race, which generally was really, really boring, this race was phenomenal and really, really good. And you had a fantastic battle up front between a couple guys throughout the field. And the couple guys were putting on a really solid and really, really good show. Early main event, Thomas Anuzi and Brent Cruz are forced off the racetrack by Wallace out going in the corner, but they didn't lose a ton of track position and slowly worked their way back up to the front. The moment that really decided this race is what happened on the final restart of the event. Brent Cruz kind of unfortunately jumped the restart ahead of Thomas Anuzi and got a penalty and would have to do a drive-through and would basically lose a chance to go to victory lane. Thomas Anuzi was able to get the race lead, and he pulled away from the rest of the field. Elon Day got up the second, and Elon was trying to close a gap in on Thomas Anuzi, but he would run out of time, and Thomas Anuzi would come off the final corner, put up a dominant clinic at the end of the race, and pick up his first ever ARCA win and the second win for Nitro Motorsports in the last 3 weeks. I've been very, very high on Thomas Anuzi's road course ability. When it was announced he was going to be driving a 70 car for Nitro Motorsports for this race, I circled this as a really good opportunity to win. I thought Brent Cruz would be a major factor, and Brent was really, really good, but he made that mistake that cost him a shot at getting it done. But Thomas is very, very talented. He's aggressive at times, there's no denying it, but he's a driver who is super good and really, really phenomenal on the road course. The guy has won some races in Trans Am, I'm pretty sure, and you look how he did in the Truck Series race until the end. He had a really, really good and very fantastic run there. I think Thomas Anuzi is someone who has a lot of potential in this sport, and to see that guy get his first ever ARCA win was phenomenal. He did a fantastic job, showed some really great pace and really good speed. Congratulations to him on winning his first ever ARCA race. He absolutely earned it, put together a fantastic and great run, and put together a well-earned and well-deserved victory. Good to see him pick up the win and pick up the victory in the race. Congratulations to him on winning the ARCA event at Lime Rock, a well-earned and well-deserved victory for him. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, we do have a couple Kyle Larson stories that we'll be talking about today on the channel. The first one revolves around his kids racing in the BC 39 Nationals in the next couple of days. Both Kyle Larson's sons and daughters will compete in the BC 39 Nationals. His young daughter Audrey will compete, and Owen Larson will also compete as well. And Kyle Larson gave his thoughts on his kids racing. He sounds like he is very excited about both of them getting the chance and opportunity to race in these events, but he's also a little bit nervous as well about his kids racing against each other in the event. But he also said that Audrey Larson is a wild child who has a lot of potential to race. I looked up some of the rankings and some of the live timing and scoring for both drivers in some of the events, and some were putting it out on social media as well. And it doesn't seem like that Audrey Larson is a slouch. She is really, really good. She was second behind Owen Larson on the time charts, so they were the two fastest cars. And it seems like that's the Larson gene at this point. If you're a Larson, you're probably going to be a really talented race car driver, because Owen Larson has won a lot of dirt races in the lower series. And now you got Audrey, who's only 4 or 5 years old, I'm pretty sure. She's starting to get into racing, and she's starting to do a really, really good job. I think both are going to be very competitive in the BC 39s. I think Kyle Larson is also competing in that event in the next couple weeks or so, which I think that's going to be really, really exciting to see what Kyle Larson can do. I think he's going to be a major factor and strong contender to get it done over there. Nonetheless, great to see Larson praise his kids for what they're doing at the moment. Good to see him get the chance and opportunity to race in those events. I think they're both going to be strong in the future, and I think both have a lot of potential, a lot to gain. Good to see them both out there racing and competing. Great to see them both have a chance and opportunity to do some more racing in the future. I think they're both going to be strong, and I like Larson praising his family, getting the racing side of things. They're both very good, and I think they're both going to have a lot of potential to be very successful in the sport in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chris Wright and Nick Lights. Now, one situation that got overlooked from the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Atlanta Motor Speedway, which was a wild and chaotic race, is what happened between Chris Wright and Nick Lights. On the final lap of the event, there was an incident between two drivers who generally run near the back of the pack throughout every single event. Chris Wright, who's been wrecking almost every single race, and Nick Lights, who's doing the best he can in underfunded equipment. We didn't really get a full-on replay of exactly what happened, but Nick Lights had a really, really funny tweet that surfaced basically saying, this is not the right automotive group, this is one of the other federal groups that we end up using, this is not the right automotive group. A jab at Chris Wright's sponsor, considering Chris Wright's father, I think, really helps and owns part of the ownership of the team, but part owns some of the sponsorship for Chris Wright currently at the moment. It seems like every single week it doesn't matter. Every single week we see Chris Wright in some sort of incident, in some sort of crash. He's always involved in some sort of contact, some wreck, and he's getting involved in incidents. Even after last night where I thought that Chris Wright was not going to get caught up in some sort of crash, in some sort of incident, guess what? He gets involved in some incident and wreck. I've said this for a while, and I don't wish anybody to be out of this series, but Chris Wright should have never gotten behind the wheel of that number 5 car this year. It should have been Anthony Alfredo still driving that car. Anthony Alfredo gave that car a chance and opportunity to make the playoffs last year. He won a Dashwood cash race, for crying out loud, and showed some really great pace and really strong speed in that car. You compare him to Chris Wright, who's been a wrecking ball all season long, has been terrible, hasn't showed any pace or speed so far this season, has done an abysmal and really, really bad job. Drivers have clowned on him for not doing a good job behind the wheel, and many don't think he deserves to be behind the wheel of a race car to begin with. He wasn't great in ARCA as well, so I don't understand why we are continuing to employ this guy in this series. I made a prediction that he may not even be back behind the wheel of that car, and I don't think he'll be back with the team next year, but he's wrecked so many cars, and it's not just a 1 week time or like every other week. It's like every single race this guy is wrecking, and it's really frustrating and really infuriating because he's taking out guys that don't deserve to be involved in crashes and involved in incidents. But it doesn't surprise or shock me considering Chris Wright is involved in everything, it seems like, every single week. We're talking about him, unfortunately, for not the right reasons, and to me it's really frustrating. We got to talk about this guy every single week for causing wrecks and incidents. Just frustrating stuff in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Days of Thunder. Now, a couple days ago, I believe it was on Friday night, Days of Thunder, one of the actors from Days of Thunder, the iconic Tom Cruise, one of the greatest actors of all time, reflected on Days of Thunder, talking about the 35-year anniversary of Days of Thunder. Days of Thunder came out on June 27th of 1990 and talked about a lot of really good things around the Days of Thunder movie, basically praising a lot of the film work and a lot of the stuff they did behind the scenes to get this movie prepared and a lot of production value that came into it. He also congratulated Brad Pitt and everyone involved in the F1 movie, which I'll be going to see here in the future, on a really fun and really, really good movie. And obviously, we're talking about a lot around Days of Thunder because there's been a lot of talk and conversation, especially from Jerry Bruckheimer and Joseph Kosinski, who've been talking a lot about the potential of the return of Days of Thunder. Again, it has been 35 years since the original Days of Thunder has come out, but we've been hearing rumors and speculation over the course of the last year or so, really since the end of 2023 going into 2024. We've been hearing rumors and speculation that they were going to be getting some sort of production. Apparently, NASCAR is starting to get involved, and the steam is beginning to build, as when they're smoking these kind of situations, there definitely is fire. And I think a lot of people have been wanting to see a sequel toward it. I mean, we had the second Top Gun Maverick come out, and Top Gun Maverick is one of the best sequels we have ever seen. I'd argue maybe almost better than the original Top Gun. It was so good, and it was really, really fun movie to watch. I think a Days of Thunder sequel is absolutely well needed for NASCAR, and I think a Days of Thunder sequel could be something that really transcends the sport to the next level. I'm not sure exactly what the plot would be for something like that, but I think it would be one of the best-selling movies in the racing side of things, and I think it'd be really good and really, really fun to watch. So I really hope we do get to see a Days of Thunder sequel in the future. I think the fact that Tom Cruise is talking about it for the first time, he's confirmed to Jeff Gordon that they're talking about getting it done. I really hope it happens because I think the movie would be really, really good. We get a movie like this in the future. I think it'd be a fun movie to definitely watch, and I really hope we do see a sequel because personally, I think it's been way too long since we've had a sequel of this movie. It needs to happen. I really hope we do see a potential sequel to this movie in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about TNT. Now, last night was the first TNT broadcast that has taken place in a very long time. The last time we had a TNT broadcast was only back in 2014, the Camping RV Sales 301 at New Hampshire Motor Speedway, where Brad Keselowski was able to pick up, I believe, his third or fourth victory of the 2014 season, in a year where Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano, Jeff Gordon, Dale Jr. were the fastest guys that year, along with Kevin Harvick and Jimmy Johnson throughout the season as well. And there was a little bit of hype around this, so I think there were some expectations that the broadcasts for TNT were not going to be as strong as the Amazon Prime broadcast. And I will say, I didn't get to do a lot of the conversation around the TNT broadcast because I wasn't really focused on that. I will say, though, for the first TNT broadcast of the year, it wasn't as good as Amazon Prime. I won't even say it was as good as the CW. I think the CW was definitely a little bit better, especially with their broadcast, and I think that Prime was definitely way better. That being said, they were still way above the levels of Fox. They actually had a post-race show. I love that Larry McReynolds went on DBC not too long ago and said, hey, we can't do a post-race show because we have the things that happen after. Guess what, TNT? They can do a post-race show, so what is Fox's excuses? Meanwhile, you got Truck Series broadcasts that have been clunky and have not been good. There were times through this first broadcast, so that I will say that there was some clunkiness and there were definitely some glaring issues that I noticed throughout the broadcast. I think it was definitely probably a B- or maybe a C+ broadcast in general. I think there's definitely some things they really do need to work on if they're going to continue broadcasting. But I know the people over there at TNT are getting helped by some of the people over from the NBC side of things and NASCAR Productions as well. And I know they're going to do what they can to try to get the best broadcast that they can, because I think that TNT wants to be good. I think it's so good they're back in the sport. Their intro was just so fun and phenomenal to watch, and it was absolutely incredible. And I want to see TNT succeed, because I think TNT being back in the sport is really, really huge for the sport in general and in a nutshell. So I really, really hope we do get some of those issues and the clunkiness of some of this broadcast figured out, because I think TNT could be a broadcast that could be really good for the sport if things can get better. So we'll see what happens in the future with the TNT side of things when it comes to the broadcast. But I think it was good. It was spectacular. I think the commentary was good, and the people that were doing it were actually doing a really good job. I think just some of the production stuff does need to be fixed on that front, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Bubba Wallace. Now, this story kind of went under the radar over the course of the last couple days, but Bubba Wallace is speaking about the lack of spotters during road course races in the NASCAR Cup Series. And he basically kind of said it's BS and we don't have a lot of spotters out for these NASCAR races currently at the moment, especially for the road courses. And he's advocating for NASCAR to get more spotters at road courses in the future, for road courses like the Chicago Street Course this weekend, or when we head to Watkins Glen in the future, or when we head to the Charlotte Roval. Bubba says that if we had more spotters on the racetrack, we wouldn't have had incidents that happened like we saw during the NASCAR Cup Series race at Mexico City. There were a couple very glaring issues that were seen at Mexico City when it came to spotting side of things. Riley Hurst had gotten spun out by a driver in the event, right? He tried to come back across the racetrack and nearly plowed into Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and nearly caused a massive wreck that did not need to happen. Where they had the spotter set up at Mexico, especially going into that area of turn 14 and turn 15, there were a lot of times where there were nearly some big wrecks and some big incidents that took place, and a lot of drivers nearly got collected in those big crashes that probably didn't almost need to be big crashes at that point, and some of that stuff was absolutely avoidable. Bubba is 100% correct on the fact that I think if you had more spotters at the racetracks, I think you definitely would have less of these glaring issues that would end up taking place, and I think that we need to see more spotters at these road courses in the future. I think if you only use two for like Chicago, for example, I don't remember how many they're going to be using. They might be using 3. I'm not entirely sure, but if they're not using 3, they need to be using 3 all across the racetrack, because the more spotters you have for these events, the better that I think it is going to be for everyone involved. One, you'll be seeing less wrecks and less incidents, because a lot of times these road courses can feel like short track races where there's a lot of chaos, a lot of spins, a lot of wrecks, you name it, that end up taking place. And I think that if we can clean some of that up, I think it'd be better for the sport in general and in a nutshell as well. So I really hope we do see some of this kind of stuff cleaned up in the future, where we're not seeing as many wrecks and incidents on these racetracks. And I really hope we can get some more spotters in the future, because the more spotters that we can have for these events, the better it's going to be. So we'll see what happens in the future in regards to this, but I do think that there needs to be some cleanup when it comes to the spotter side of things for the road courses, because I think that if you have more spotters, the better it is going to be cleaning up some of these incidents on the track, in my honest opinion. Now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Chris Gayart. Now this is noted during the TNT broadcast last night, but also noted by Kelly Crandall from Racer Magazine as well, that it looks like Chris Gayart is going to be taking a more hands-on approach when it comes to working with Ty Gibbs. As it is noted over the last couple days, that it sounds like that Chris Gayart will take a more hands-on approach with Ty Gibbs going forward. Now Tyler Allen is still going to be the crew chief for Ty Gibbs for the remainder of the season, but Chris Gayart is going to be helping with a lot of strategy, among other things going forward, to try to help Ty Gibbs improve throughout the remainder of the regular season. I think bringing Chris Gayart in to help Ty Gibbs is a really, really big deal. When Chris Gayart worked with Denny Hamlin, they both gelled very, very well together. Denny Hamlin and Chris Gayart both had a ton of success. Denny Hamlin won a lot of races, but then at the end of last year, they made some major changes and moved Chris Gayart more to higher up in more of an executive role at the team and the program, as he now is a competition director for the team. And then you think about what's been going on with the rest of the drivers. All three drivers outside of Ty Gibbs have gone to victory lane. Denny Hamlin's gotten 3 wins so far this season, those being, of course, at Michigan recently. Then he picked up a win at Martinsville and also won at Darlington. Chase Briscoe most recently won at Pocono. And then you think about Christopher Bell. He's picked up 3 wins so far this year. He picked up 3 straight wins in a row. He won at Atlanta. Then he won at Coda, and then he, of course, picked up the win at Phoenix in a really good and great, fantastic battle at the end of the event. I think that Chris Gayart is going to bring a lot to the table to really help get this program back underway. Now, Ty Gibbs, I will say, the last 2 weeks in particular, I'm not sure if Chris Gayart is really playing a role at this situation, but I think having him there is going to help Ty Gibbs get a lot better. And I think they want to try to get Ty Gibbs an opportunity to pick up the win. Now, going into this weekend at Chicago, I think Ty Gibbs is going to be a major factor for the win. I think he is going to have a very, very fast car because the 54 car has been really, really good at the road courses. And outside of Shane Van Gisbergen, I think Ty Gibbs was maybe the fastest car out there until he got a lot of bad track position and lost a ton of ground near the end of the race. And that's one opportunity they had that they unfortunately squandered and lost an opportunity to go to victory lane. And when you're in a playoff situation, a playoff system like we have right now, you can't squander those opportunities to go to victory lane. And that's on the crew chief to get a lot better on that front. But I do think that for, Chris Gayart coming in and working with working with Ty Gibbs, I think that's going to be a great opportunity for him to work with him. I think we're going to see some major improvement going forward with Gayart and Ty Gibbs. And I think Ty Gibbs might get in the top 20 regular season standings if he doesn't get the win. And maybe he continues to show that improvement. And maybe we see Ty Gibbs get to victory lane for the first time. We'll see what happens in the future, but I think it's a great decision to bring him into the team and help get that 54 team back up in the swing and back and rolling. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chandler Smith and Jordan Taylor. Now, if you watch the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series yesterday at Lime Rock Park, most of the entire race, you probably saw a very mundane and pretty boring NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Lime Rock Park until the end of the event. So there was a caution that took place with around 10 laps to go in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Lime Rock Park when Matt Mills went off the racetrack, had some sort of braking issue going in the corner, and spun out and could not get the truck refired. This caused a restart that took place at the end of the event. Going into the corner, everyone decided to try to make moves. Lane Riggs tried to make a move to the inside, actually got the jump on Corey Heim on the restart, but Lane Riggs missed the corner. This caused everybody to check up, and then Jordan Taylor, Raj Kroof got spun. We didn't find out who spun out Jordan Taylor until the end of the race when Jordan Taylor made a little bit of a tweet saying we had a really good truck today, shows some really good speed. Thanks to Chandler Smith for forcing us up the racetrack and spinning us out going into the corner. Then Chandler Smith in the 38 team responded saying, thank God we got in the Rodney Sandstorm and basically got a really good finish and got ourselves a top 10 finish in the event despite causing the incident. I really don't know what Chandler Smith was doing there, and I really don't like the fact he was trying to say we got through a sandstorm. If you're trying to insinuate that Jordan Taylor was at fault for that incident, Chandler Smith, you are clearly wrong. When I look back at the replay that they actually had, Chandler Smith completely sent in the corner and completely missed it. And it's a shame because that last restart cost a lot of drivers a really good chance and opportunity. Jordan Taylor had a fantastic run. He was the third best truck most of the day. I do think that Lane Riggs and Corey Heim, who eventually won the race, were the two best trucks all day long. But I think that Jordan Taylor had a third place truck. Every time Jordan Taylor has been behind the wheel of either a truck or a car in NASCAR, he's at top 5 and top 10 speed every single time. When he substituted for Chase, he had a really fast car, qualified up front, but did not get the finish that I think he truly deserved. And then you think about Portland, a couple of the races that he ran in Xfinity. He had great runs going there, running in the top 10, and they got taken out by somebody and got damaged in a wreck. And in this case and situation, instead of finishing maybe on the podium and getting a top 3 or top 4 finish, he finishes in 20th position because everybody wanted to go crazy at the end of these races. But that's unfortunately kind of how it's been in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. When you get get to the end of these races, especially on the road course side of things, or get to the end of races in any NASCAR series at road courses, even going back to the days of like the 90s and 2000s, when you have a late race restart, someone would try to make a bonsai move, and sometimes you're kind of on the receiving end of it, and sometimes you're a lucky one and get through the wrecks and incident. But I just didn't like the fact that Chandler Smith was trying to insinuate that maybe Jordan Taylor was at fault for the incident. Jordan Taylor should not have been getting clowned on by Chandler Smith here. I think that's a bad judgment call by Chandler Smith on that part. I think Chandler Smith's judgment wasn't the smartest there, but that's not surprising considering Chandler Smith doesn't always make the best judgment calls on things at this point. So I'm not surprised to see Chandler Smith try to call Jordan Taylor on something like this. I don't know if he was joking or not, but I don't think it was funny what he said. I think Chandler Smith should probably apologize to Jordan because he cost Jordan a chance and opportunity at a potential win in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Hill and Daniel Dye. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Atlanta Motor Speedway, also known as Echo Park, still going to call it Atlanta Motor Speedway, you saw the incident between Austin Hill and Daniel Dye. Apparently, there was an incident that happened on the racetrack between these two guys near the end of the event when Austin Hill was already many laps down in the event because Austin Hill had a good car early, but then he had a fuel pressure issue. They had some sort of issue in the front of the car, kind of like they had at Daytona, and they went many laps down and went nearly 6 or 7 laps down in the event. Now, Austin Hill, despite this, was able to finish inside the top 30 of the race because Austin Hill was still fast, and despite the fact that there was a lot of guys that fell out of contention in the race and fell out because of wrecks and incidents that took place throughout the event. Now, apparently both these guys had a conversation that took place, and apparently Austin Hill basically told Daniel Dye to not flip him off once again on the racetrack, and he said if he does it, there's probably something bad that is going to happen. Austin Hill always gets in some sort of confrontation and some sort of wreck. Look, I think Austin Hill is a really, really good race car driver. And the guy can drive a race car, especially at super speedways. I don't think there's any denying it. This guy has been the fastest guy at super speedway tracks, especially at Atlanta Motor Speedway. He's led more laps than anybody's ever led in NASCAR Xfinity's competition at super speedways. He's almost won the most races, if not already, in Xfinity competition at super speedways. But Austin Hill also sometimes drives him way over his head and sometimes can be way too aggressive on the racetrack. And sometimes he does not take responsibility for some of the incidents and some of the chaos that he causes on the racetrack. And sometimes he just makes some moves that I don't understand, like his teammate Jesse Love did, for example, during the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Atlanta. He caused some pretty big crashes and pretty big incidents on the racetrack that I absolutely think were definitely avoidable on that part. I think for Austin Hill, going after Daniel Dye, being upset with Daniel Dye about some sort of incident, maybe getting flipped off, it's kind of similar to what happened to Eric Almirola and Bubba Wallace in a sense, where Eric Almirola and Bubba Wallace had a confrontation on pit road. Apparently, Bubba had been flipping off and cussing him out on the racetrack, according to Eric Almirola said it. Then they had a confrontation on pit road during the 2023 Coca-Cola 600. Then we all know what happened the next year during a Toyota competition meeting where both got into a little bit of a shoving match in a fight when Eric Almirola was the instigator. It feels very similar to this. I don't like it when drivers get upset or getting flipped off. Drivers have gotten flipped off before in NASCAR competition. So something like this isn't new in competition, so for some reason Austin Hill being upset, I don't really understand that at this point. I think Austin Hill needs to be focused on trying to turn the season around a little bit instead of being upset about someone flipping him off in these situations, in these incidents. Of course, he's also got a Cup Series race that he's running this week, and so he'll be doing double duty in the Cup race in Xfinity event. He's got to focus a lot more on that. Nonetheless, kind of wild situation on these parts in this aspect of what happened here. Kind of crazy what happened there that Daniel Dye and Austin Hill are getting into a confrontation over something stupid like this. I think it's something that probably should have been avoided, in my honest opinion, a situation like this, especially since both these teams are working very close to each other in Welcome, North Carolina. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. Now, Eric Gayart brought this up on his channel. I was planning to talk about this story as well. But Dalton Hopkins from Front Stretch compiled a lot of comments around drivers and team owners in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. There has been a lot of talk about the Truck Series purses this year. I've gone through and talked about this, in fact, every single week that we have a Truck Series event. And generally so far this year, the purse money in the Craftsman Truck Series has been really, really low. When you look at the NASCAR Cup Series, they generally have around $10 to $11 million to sometimes even $12 million on the purse money there. When you look at the Xfinity Series, they usually have $1.7 to $1.8 million. Not the most ideal, but it's not that bad, all things considered. But the Truck Series, they get only about 6 or 7% of the TV revenue every single week compared to the NASCAR Cup Series. Now, last year, the Cup Series is probably getting around, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 million at most events, but when they added the new charter buyouts and the teams in the Cup Series getting the most money on that front, they increased the purses for the NASCAR Cup Series. And many team owners are very, very concerned about the increase of purses for Cup, but the Truck Series not getting as much money. And they kind of talked about the concerns about the fact that a lot of these teams had to go out to the tracks, like Las Vegas, for example. Remember, Las Vegas entry list, there was only 31 trucks that showed up to the event. Meanwhile, the maximum that you can have in a Truck Series race is 32. We have only had 1 or 2 Truck Series races this year that have had full fields in 2025. And that is really, really concerning. You don't have a lot of these single teams that are showing up on a week-by-week basis, and that's really disappointing in my opinion that we haven't been able to see that. I think a big reason for that is because the costs are really, really high in the Truck Series, and you don't have a big enough purse that can go in there and compensate a lot of these teams and a lot of car owners as well. Now, with Ram coming in 2026, I think that this is going to help a little bit. I think having a new manufacturer come in, that manufacturer is going to help bring a lot of money and I think that will help in a really, really big way when it comes to that purse inside of things. It's because I think with the Truck Series, you're going to see more of the money coming in, especially for some of those teams affiliated. Now, we don't exactly know what teams are going to be affiliated with Ram going into 2026. There have been talks about maybe like Cletus McFarlane getting involved. We know Nice Motorsports confirmed recently that they're not going to be one of the teams switching over. We've heard rumors of GMS coming in. We've heard rumors of other teams potentially switching over like Halmer Friesen or CR7 Motorsports that could switch over next year. But I think we need to see increases in the purses. I think NASCAR should increase at least some of the purse money for the Craftsman Truck Series. I don't think there needs to be an insane amount, but I think you need to have at least 1 to 1.2 million for trucks. Maybe increase the purse money to over 2 million for Xfinity, maybe Cup. Drop that down a little bit, but then you have the teams in Cup that would be a little bit frustrated about losing some of the purse money that they're getting. So I think we need to see increases for the Truck Series on the purse money. So I think that'd be better for the series going forward. In my honest opinions, I think that would especially help the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kurt Busch. Now, this story went a little bit under the radar over the weekend because of all the stuff that happened in Atlanta and also happened at Lion Rock Park as well. But Kurt Busch confirmed on Saturday before the NASCAR Cup Series race took place at Atlanta Motor Speedway, he confirmed that he will be part of IROC and will be competing in the IROC Revival event, so it will be taking place around at Laguna Seca, and I believe August at the end of this year, and we'll compete in some of the IROC events. They're going to be taking place in the Revival events in 2025. This is a really big deal. Kurt Busch is once again back behind the wheel. Now, we have recently seen Kurt Busch at the beginning of the year. It was confirmed that Kurt Busch had been medically cleared to return to racing. He competed in the Race of Champions in Miami, I believe, in March, and there was some outside talk and conversations that Kurt Busch could maybe return to NASCAR in some way, shape, or form. But Kurt Busch, as of right now, is not planning to return to NASCAR. Now, obviously, we all know that Kurt Busch has basically been inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame for the 2026 class. It obviously makes a lot of sense. Kurt Busch won 34 career NASCAR Cup Series races, won the Daytona 500 in 2017, won the Cup Series Championship in 2004, won the Coke 600 in 2010, and won a lot of other big events throughout his career and helped a lot of teams and a lot of organizations go out and compete and win championships in these series and contend for championships. He really also helped 2311 Racing build that program up and got that team on a really good footing, and that's why we've seen 2311 get better as a team and organization. What's so exciting about seeing Kurt Busch back behind the wheel, though, of doing some sort of racing like this, is he's gotten the chance and opportunity to be involved with the team 2311 again. We've been seeing him get a little more involved with this team and program, especially as of late. He's been at a lot more events as of recently. He was at Pocono not too long ago. He got the opportunity to give the command for the NASCAR Cup Series race at Pocono. He was at Mexico City helping the team try to improve that program and get their road course program a little bit better. They had some unfortunate issues and trouble a couple weeks ago at Mexico City. That's why I'm a little concerned about the speed of the road course program at the moment going to Chicago, even though I think the Toyotas are going to be really, really fast. But I think a lot of people are wondering, will we ever see Kurt Busch come back and race in NASCAR in the future? Honestly, I really hope it does happen. I want to see Kurt Busch come back and race in the sport in the future because I really believe that Kurt Busch basically never got the chance and opportunity to really close out his career. I think a one-off or a two-off in his career would be really, really good to see. But if he never comes back and races in the sport again, it is what it is at this point. But I think it'd be really, really good for NASCAR overall in general if something like that could happen where Kurt can come back and do a one-off or two-off in the sport. But then you got the issue, right, of how many cars could you run for 23XI Racing because you got 3 full-time cars currently at the moment. And there still is uncertainty unknown with what's going to happen with the lawsuit because remember, 23XI Racing and Front Row are in a lawsuit with NASCAR currently at the moment. And there's some concern that with this lawsuit going on, that it could affect the opportunity for someone like maybe down the road, Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, getting the chance and opportunity to drive for teams like 23XI or other organizations in the future like this. So I'm very interested to see if we'll ever see Kurt Busch come back because I would absolutely love to see it. I'm glad to see that he's been involved in the sport in some way, shape, or form and getting back involved in the sport a little bit more in recent years because I think him being involved in the sport is super important. I think it's big for NASCAR to have someone like Kurt Busch continue to be more involved in the sport going forward into the future. But it's been good to see him get involved in NASCAR again. It has been great to see him get back involved. But nonetheless, it's good to see Kurt Busch going to race in IROC. I think Jeff Gordon's going to be part of that. I believe other drivers like Paul Tracy have been confirmed. I think Michael Andretti's been confirmed for it. I think Jimmy Vasser's been confirmed for it as well. And some other legends of motorsports have been confirmed to run the IROC series. It's Ray Abraham's ambition. We won't be seeing the SRX, unfortunately, come back in the future. But I think for Kurt, it's great to see something like this, to get the opportunity to be part of the IROC events. And pretty cool that Kurt will get the chance and opportunity to do something like that going forward into the not-so-distant future. Really awesome and really, really good stuff. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we are talking about Kyle Larson once again. Now there has been a lot of talk and a lot of conversation around Kyle Larson over the course of the last couple weeks. Since Kyle Larson has ran the double, there hasn't been the best performance we have seen from Kyle Larson, but he's been getting this question once again about maybe in the future doing the double once again. What is the double? Well, for those who don't know that are new to motorsports, the double is running the Indy 500 and the Coca-Cola 600 on the same day and trying to compete all 1,100 miles. There's only one driver who's attempted a double that's been able to complete that, and that is Tony Stewart back in 2001. Tony Stewart finished, I believe, in 6th place in the 2001 Indianapolis 500, and then he went to the Coke 600, had to start at the rear, spun out at one point, by the way, but recovered and finished in 3rd place. Drivers have attempted it and come very close. Kurt Busch had an opportunity to do it in 2014, finished in 6th position in the Indianapolis 500, and unfortunately had an engine failure with around 100 laps to go. Now, Kyle Larson attempted it last year in 2024. Unfortunately, didn't get the chance and opportunity to compete for the win. He didn't get a chance to even run the Coke 600 to begin with, and the rain came in and it was a major, major factor. Now, this year in 2025, Kyle Larson had a lot of unfortunate things that happened in this event this time around that cost Kyle Larson a chance and opportunity. Even if he didn't have a crash that took place around halfway in the event, there was no way Kyle Larson was going to compete the overall event and was not going to get a chance and opportunity to compete for the win. It's a shame because Larson's car was starting to improve and Kyle Larson was making some pretty impressive moves before some of the cautions that took place. And then, unfortunately, the Coke 600 for Kyle Larson was definitely a little bit of a dumpster fire for him. He led the first 40 laps of the race, basically, and then he spun out, had rear toe link damage, got back on the lead lap, and unfortunately, he got caught up in a crash thanks to Daniel Suarez and Chase Briscoe and those guys being way too aggressive down the front straightaway, and that cost him a chance to go for the win there. And now Larson was asked once again, are you going to do it? And he confirmed recently that he says, no, I have no desire to run the Indy NASCAR double once again. He did say that he would absolutely love to do the Indy 500 again in the future and hopes to get the chance and opportunity maybe down the road to run the Indy 500. But he said it will probably be after his NASCAR career is officially over. I think that makes a lot of sense. He talked about a lot of logistical issues, and with NASCAR's time constraint, you also got to think about the other big thing. NASCAR has the new rules for the waiver policy that have come in as of late. And that, unfortunately, is a major factor why you're not seeing as many drivers nowadays potentially trying to do this double. You're not seeing many drivers do it anymore in the future. And that's why you haven't seen like Kyle Busch do it recently. Though I think if we could see someone else do it that I would love to see it do it before their racing career comes to an end, it'd definitely be someone like Kyle Busch, because Kyle Busch, I think, has earned the right and opportunity and the chance to kind of run the double. He had an opportunity to do it in 2017 with Team Penske. That deal unfortunately fell through because Joe Gibbs didn't sign off on it. Then a couple years ago in 2024, Kyle Busch was going to get the chance and opportunity to run with Aaron McLaren, but then they got an opportunity to work with Hendrick Motorsports, that being Aaron McLaren, to give Larson an opportunity there, and that deal for Kyle did not end up happening. But Kyle Busch absolutely wants to run the double and would love to run the Indy 500, and I think if there's anyone that could put up the same level of performance as Kyle Larson, I certainly think it's Kyle Busch. Even though Kyle Busch is not as good anymore as Kyle Larson is, I think Kyle Busch would have been a good guy to do it. And there's some maybe saying doing the reverse, like a Scott McLaughlin, for example. Scott McLaughlin has expressed interest in wanting to maybe do the double the other way, run the Indy 500 and the Co 600 on the same day, where the main focus could be on the Indy 500, but then come down and run the Co 600. Scott McLaughlin had an opportunity in his career, in fact, to go and race in like IndyCar, NASCAR, for example. He had the opportunity to either run the Team Penske Xfinity Series program a couple years back or run the IndyCar program, and he chose the IndyCar program, and look at him now. He's been one of the most successful drivers we've seen in IndyCar, and a driver who could win a championship in the future. Not going to happen this year with the lack of speed from the Penske cars and just the unfortunate bad luck that they've had so far this season. But I think for Kyle Larson, him not wanting to do the double makes a lot of sense. I think if things had gone well this year and didn't have the rain issues that came into play and was able to complete every single lap, and then the Indy 500 and the Co 600, ran really, really well for Larson, I then think that Larson would do it once again, but there's just too many logistical issues and too many logistical factors that have unfortunately are going to affect Larson's opportunity down the road and into the future of doing something like that. And it's disappointing too, right? Because I think many of us, including myself as a fan, want to see Kyle Larson complete something like this, because completing something like this could really put Kyle Larson into that next big level superstar. I think Kyle Larson is someone who can be a superstar for the sport. He's one of the best drivers in NASCAR we have seen in the last 10 to 15 years, even though he's been in a little bit of slump as of late. But I think that because of some of the unfortunate circumstances that have taken place, you're not going to see Larson probably do it in the future right now, which is unfortunate because I want to see Kyle Larson do it again. I want to see Larson compete in the Indy 500 once again. I want to see Larson compete in other big events in the world. He's not running some extra events currently at the moment. I think the lack of racing and some of the things have affected Larson. We haven't seen the same performance from Larson we saw early in the year. I think that can change if Larson gets more opportunities to race and do things he wants to do. But as of right now, I'm not surprised or shocked to see he's not going to be doing the double in the future. He's holding off on doing the double. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. The main focus is NASCAR right now. He'll do some dirt racing, but he's not running that supercar race. He canceled doing that event against guys like Will Brown, Cam Waters, and Brock Feeney in that. So some of those guys will be running this weekend at Chicago, which is exciting. But I'm not surprised to see this. It's disappointing, but I'm not surprised to see that Kyle Larson will not be doing the double in the future as he focuses on trying to get better on the NASCAR front, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the final major story in today's episode as we're talking about RFK Racing. Now, it was announced last week, shockingly, I believe it was on Thursday, that TJ Bashire has purchased Rickware Racing and is selling all his assets off to TJ Bashire going forward. Now, Rickware is still going to be handling a lot of the operations to help with the team going forward, while Cody Ware is still going to continue being the driver in 2026. But TJ Bashire has stated publicly that they want to be a three-car team by the 2027 season, which means that we could potentially see an organization like RFK Racing affected going into the 2027 season. Now, currently, RFK Racing and Rick Ware do have a licensing agreement for one of the charters that goes through 2026. Currently, the lease for the RFK charter for the number 6 car that Ryan Preece is currently driving, that is being leased through the number 15 car currently at the moment. They will transfer that back over to Rick Ware Racing for the number 51 car, and then the number 51 charter will go to the number 60 car for 2026. So RFK Racing will remain the same at least through the 2026 season. But the big question surrounds 2027. And Brad Keselowski kind of was asked this question about the Rick Ware Racing sale earlier this weekend. And Brad Keselowski says it is to be determined on what could happen with the Rick Ware Racing sale, on whether they will be a 3-car team in 2027 or could downsize back to a 2-car team in a 2027 year. And we also don't know what's going to happen with the charters altogether with the lawsuit going on currently at the moment between 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports. Now, currently at the moment, everything is still set for 2026. Brad Keselowski is going to continue driving number 6 car next year. Chris Buescher is going to continue driving number 17. And Ryan Preece will continue driving the number 60. So what are the potential scenarios if something like this happens where they don't get to have a 3-car team if Rick Ware Racing or the name that TJ Bashire is going to have? What could happen to RFK Racing? Well, like I mentioned, there is a really good chance and a pretty good possibility that we could see RFK Racing downsize to a 2-car operation in 2027. This could mean a couple things. Either one, Ryan Preece could potentially be let go of the team at the end of 2026. That is a potential possibility if Brad Keselowski is still around. Or number 2, Brad Keselowski decides to go ahead and retire at the end of the 2026 season, and Ryan Preece then takes over the number 6 car. Let's begin with the first hypothetical, Ryan Preece leaving the team. I really don't want to see Ryan Preece lose his ride with RFK Racing. He has finally got a good team to work with. He's been having a really, really good season with RFK Racing so far in 2025. He's been having a career year. He's in the top 20 in the NASCAR Cup Series points, which I predicted going into the year, and he has shown some really, really good speed. He's been as close to his teammate Chris Buescher all year long, and he's a guy that's been really not getting up there and overall contending for the wins. He's been showing some really impressive pace and some really, really good speed on a week-by-week basis, and has been having a really good year and has been doing a fantastic job. He didn't get a chance at opportunities to do it with teams like Stewart-Haas Racing, because Stewart-Haas Racing was falling off a cliff near the end of the time, and Kevin Harvick was aging at this point, and the team wasn't performing up to level. I mean, Kevin Harvick couldn't win in his final season. They just didn't have the pace and speed in 2023. And then you think about other teams that he drove for, like Hayek Motorsports, which is JTG Doherty. They were never a top-level team. The 37 car he drove for, that was basically an unchartered car that didn't have a charter for the season at the time. So that was going on at that point. I think it would be really, really bad if you did not see Brian Preece there. But I don't think that is the most likely option of what is going to happen in 2027. My early prediction right now is that more than likely Brad Keselowski is going to retire at the end of 2026. Brad Keselowski, if of course it goes away like this. Look, I think Brad Keselowski is still a really, really good driver. The last couple races, Brad Keselowski's been improving. He has had 4 top 10 finishes in the last 6 races and has jumped inside the top 30 in points and came very close to winning his first NASCAR Cup Series race since Darlington Raceway in 2024, where he finished second this past weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. But look, I've been saying this for a while. Brad Keselowski's long-term goal is eventually take over ownership completely of this organization. I think that he has been the weakest link at RFK Racing so far in 2025. My thing is that I think it would make a lot of sense at this moment to put Ryan Preece full-time in that number 6 car in 2027. Let Brad have a final send-it-off year in 2026, and then maybe focus on going more to the ownership side of things, and Ryan Preece be the full-time driver going into next year and 2027. I think he could be the heir of that number 6 car going into next year. I think that's the exciting part, because I think if Ryan Preece in the 6 car and gets to work with Derek Finley in 2027, I think again you've got a really good combination, and you have 2 really good drivers who used to be teammates over at Hayek Motorsports a few years ago, who I think could do a really good job and gel very well together and show some really great pace and really good speed in the next couple years. But going back to the side of things of the Rick Ware Racing sale, you got drivers who could be potential candidates for those seats going into 2027. Cody Ware, again, is still going to be the driver over there next year. They're going to have a second car at least part-time. I do think Corey LaJoie is going to drive that car quite a bit next year. Corey LaJoie is very much worked with TJ Bashire for many years, and with TJ being over there, I think it's going to be easy for Corey LaJoie to get an opportunity to drive for that team going into 2026. I think Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer, also candidates who could make some select Cup starts next year. I think both earned the right to at least get an opportunity to make a few starts. And I think Harrison Burton, who did, by the way, make a start with Rick Ware Racing earlier this year at the All-Star race, I think he will also make a few starts. He's been doing a really good job in that car, been doing a lot better than Haley Deegan's been doing in that car this year. Doing about as good as Brett Moffitt did a couple years ago with AM Racing. He's been showing some really, really good speed in that car. And I think he did okay at the All-Star race, all things considered, with the car that didn't have a lot of funding going into it, despite the fact Dex Imaging was helping quite a bit. I am interested, though, to see what happens to RFK. They're trying to maybe down the road have an Xfinity program. Brad's been insinuating maybe they bring their truck program back in the future with Brad Keselowski racing again, and they want to expand to IMSA as well. But if they lose the opportunity to keep 3 cars, that expansion plan might get thrown out the window, unfortunately. So we'll see what happens in the not-so-distant future when it comes to side things at RFK Racing, but they could downsize in the next couple of years, and we'll see what happens to RFK Racing going forward in the future with that organization and team. So, that is going to be today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, turn notifications on, so notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. List description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. You think RFK Racing will downsize by 2027 because of the Rick Racing sale? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Kyle Larson confirming he doesn't plan to run a double in the future? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we're going to be doing the entrance video for the Grand Park 165 at the Chicago Street Course. Then Wednesday, we're going to have a NASCAR news video discussing news over the course of the last couple days. And we're going to have the Xfinity Series race picks for the Xfinity race at the Loop 110 at Chicago. Then, of course, on Thursday, we're going to have the Cup race picks for the Grand Park 165 and the paint scheme video as well. And then on Friday, we're going to have a NASCAR news video discussing news over the course of the last couple days. We're going to have qualifying reactions for Chicago for Xfinity and Cup. We're also, of course, going to have the Xfinity review on Saturday and the Cup review on Sunday as well. We got content coming out on people like Haley Deegan, Shaman Gisberg, and Cards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, Kyle Larson, Ryan Preece, Chase Elliott, Sam Mayer, Sheldon Creed, Connor Zilich, Jr. Motorsports, Cletus Farron, Dodge, Ram, Frankie Muniz, Ryan Preece, like I said, Chris Buescher, Tyler Reddick, the lawsuit between 2011 front row, Michael Jordan, Carson Quaffle, and you name it. A lot of good stuff dropping on the channel in the coming days and weeks. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.